Good morning, everybody. Steve here, and today, retired in Korea, doctor strike court case. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk a little bit about Korea and medical and how much money they make. And then we're going to round it off with racism and ageism in Korea. Yeah, that's a very interesting thing. Um, who knew? Anyway, we're going to start off today. We're going to talk about the doctor strike. For the people that don't know, a number of months ago, I think it went back to February, is that the resident doctors who make up about 30 or 40% of the workforce, these are people that went to medical school, they're doing their residency, and the Korean Medical Association, normally a leftist organization and kind of a liberal mindset, decided they wanted to go on strike because the Korean government said, hey, we need some more doctors. About over 20% of our population is becoming aged or super aged. And with that, I don't know if you young people know this, but if you get old, you will have more medical appointments. Your body breaks down, the law of thermodynamics and breaking down and all that stuff. And yeah, creaking knees and snap, pop, crackle, whatever. All of that stuff comes into play. And next thing you know, your eyes are going bad, you're getting cataracts, you're having this, and this hurts, and that hurts, arthritis. And that's just normal aging. And then you have the injuries, and then you have the diseases, and so on and so forth. And so things get exponentially worse as you get older, which requires medical care. The interesting thing here in Korea is that these doctors decided to go on strike at the behest of the Korean Medical Association, the doctors' union, as I refer to it. And that doctors' union kind of reminds me of the unions in the United States with Jimmy Hoffa. There's corruption, and yeah, it kind of reminds me of that. You might be asking, well, Steve, why does that remind you of Jimmy Hoffa and the unions back in the day and the corrupt organizations that had such influence? Well, let me tell you, for the last 27 years, the Korean Medical Association has rejected any call for the government to increase the number of doctors in Korea. 27 years. And they have gone on strike over and over and over again saying, we don't need more doctors. We don't need more doctors. And after doing some digging, the mantra or the rhetoric that they say is that if we have more doctors, it'll create more competition, and that's bad. It will lessen the quality of care that the people get if we get more doctors, which really doesn't make any sense because the doctors that they have now did pre-med medical school and then went through residency and became doctors after they passed their boards. Well, medical students go through they do pre-med medical school, do their residency. The standards are all the same, so I'm not really understanding how people would get less quality care by having more doctors. Oh, and by the way, the Korean Medical Association, has also complained that they work far too hard and too long. They do 36-hour shifts, and then after that, it's just 100, 120 hours a week. They see up to 100 patients a day. They don't have general practitioners or PCMs primary care managers. So in other words, if you have a problem with your gut, you're going to go see the gut doctor. If you have a problem with your head, you're going to go see the ears, eyes, nose, and throat dude. If you got some mental issues, you'll see the psychologist or a shrink or whatever it is. So yeah, they have all these different departments and you don't have a GP. And so all of these people are claiming to be overworked, and it's just so terrible. But they don't want more doctors. I don't know. I have kind of a small insight into the medical world in the fact that our daughter is a doctor and she went through residency, and every single person that she knows, and the people who are doctors have been doctors for a long time, or like her who just finished her residency, that would they love to have, 2 or 3 more resident doctors on staff in the departments that they were working in? And the answer is a resounding yes, because that would alleviate the overburden and the work that they have. Pretty much doctors and residents work at a bare bones level. So it's the lowest level. And so let's say if you have like 5 resident doctors and they're going to report to some higher doctor to make sure that they don't kill anybody and, that they're learning what they need to learn, which is a good thing. It's as it should be. But if one of those resident doctors gets sick, then one of the other 4 doctors need to take the place or take the workload off of that person, and they're already working their ass off. And so, yeah, more people is always, always, always a good thing. Now, especially when you get into Korea and they're talking about, we work 100, 120 hours a week, and if we get more doctors, it'll just destroy the medical system. That is a quote from the Korean Medical Association. They also say that it would reduce the pay of current doctors. And my favorite one is where the KMA says it would reduce the prestige of being a doctor. So in other words, if you have more doctors, it's almost like here's a cup of prestige. And we only have a certain number of doctors, and they'll get a certain amount of prestige. And if we get more doctors that will partake of this cup of prestige, each doctor will get less prestige than they did before, and we can't have that. That's actually what they said. And I'm they offer no solutions. It's like, you're working 120 hours a week, 120 hours a week, 36-hour shifts. I mean, you don't have time to eat. You're seeing over 100 patients a day. Even by their own administration, they say that Korean doctors see patients on average 3 to 4 minutes because of the mass amounts of people that they have to treat. And a lot of doctors are in Seoul, and so a lot of people have to take a taxi, a train, a bus, or whatever to get to see a doctor at a big hospital, the big 5 hospitals in Seoul, because everybody wants to go to Seoul. I kind of get it. It's kind of like the Hollywood or the New York City of Korea, and everybody wants to go to Seoul, and everything's expensive, and so on and so forth. It's kind of, like, well, if you live in Seoul, then you've arrived. It's interesting, though, because the doctors in Korea after residency are the highest paid occupations in Korea. And so apparently they're getting paid enough, and we'll look over some information on how much they get paid and so on and so forth. Resident gets paid about $3,000 a month, which is kind of fair because you're still a resident, you haven't passed your board exams, you're not officially a real doctor, but you're still going to be working your ass off for those number of years. So anyway, about 10,000 of these resident doctors, some people say 12 or 13,000, have just kind of said, screw it, we're going to go on strike because the KMAs told us to go on strike because we don't want more doctors. Yeah, it's really weird. So anyway, there's this whole thing that the Korean government says, hey, we need 2,000 more doctors, so we're going to open up and authorize 2,000 more spots in medical schools. And this Korean Medical Association just blew their minds, and they're like, we can't have that because the prestige, the lack of prestige, and this and that. It'll make doctors competitive, and that's bad. It'll destroy the quality of care. And it's like, but the Korean government isn't changing the standards of how to become a doctor or anything like that. So, yeah, very, very, very weird. So anyway, this ends up going to court, and they're talking about suspensions of licenses, and already the people that are doing their residency have been out of work long enough to the point of where they're going to have to redo that year of residency. And that sucks. According to my daughter and other people that I've talked to, that residency, they don't want to do more than one day than they absolutely have to because it's bad. It's hard, it's rough, and nobody wants to do residency. So now these resident doctors have been out long enough, they're going to have to redo that year of residency. And if you don't use it, you lose it, at least for most people. So yeah, it's getting very problematic. And in previous videos, we talked about how these resident doctors who are no longer working suddenly find themselves without income. And so now they're like trying to get side jobs, side gigs, whatever it is. And people are finding out because it's a law, you need to put on your resume what you did. And if on your resume, it says that you were a resident doctor and you quit because of the strike, Korean employers are like, we're not going to hire you. that in like 80 some odd percent of the Korean people agree with the government that they need more doctors. So yeah, it's a thing, and it even went to court, and that's what we're going to take a look at next. So this right here shows the Korean Herald. Court refuses injunction on medical school expansion. South Korea to have first med school quota hike in 27 years. Medical sector to appeal the court decision. So in other words, it went to court, and the court said, yeah, you don't have a leg to stand on. We need more doctors. And it's not like it's a huge increase. It's only 2,000 more slots. And there's about 40 medical schools here in Korea. So you do the math, and it's not really that big. Now, considering there's about 100 teaching hospitals, that would mean about maybe an extra, 20 residents per teaching hospital. And how many departments do you have in hospitals? There's a bunch. So you might get one per department, maybe two. But the Korean Medical Association says, no, getting more doctors would only, it would ruin the medical system and all the stuff that we said before. So anyway, it goes to court, and the court said, yeah, it's a thing. It's going to be increased. With the obstacles now cleared, the Seoul High Court's ruling allows the government to proceed with its contentious plan of adding 2 more admission seats to medical schools, despite the opposition from doctors and students. Now, here's the interesting thing, is that the KMA, the Korean Medical Association, the Doctors Mafia Union, has even influenced medical school students to quit and go on strike. Now they've missed enough time to where they're going to have to repeat that year of medical school. Oh, and by the way, how is this going to ripple out into the rest of the world here in Korea? Well, just like in the United States, if you want to go to medical school, you need to get student loans. You get student loans, and those have to be paid back. And so if the students just quit, and 46% of them did, because the KMA said go on strike and stop going to school, yeah, this is going to be very problematic, because it's going to ripple out into the financial sector to where, we used to issue loans for people that would become doctors because they're the highest paid profession. So we have a real good, it's a low risk loan, and we'll make some money, and they become doctors, and everybody's happy. Yeah, now this isn't becoming a good thing. So now I'm assuming that you're going to have insurance, there's going to be insurance claims, and there's going to be bad loans, and so on and so forth. Loan repayment and debt here in Korea is, it is rough. It's not like in the United States where it's like, oh, I got too much debt, I'll just claim bankruptcy, and then boom, you're good to go. Here in Korea, it is way, way worse, and it can hold on to you and your family for like ever if you don't pay it back. So anyway, this is the first medical school quota in 27 years. That's insane. So even though we have technology in Korea, I have been to like Samsung Medical Center. It is one of the top 5 hospitals in Korea. That's where I got my retinal tear surgery, my detached retina surgery, and cataract surgery, and all that in one fell swoop. Awesome place, incredible staff, great work. I have no complaints whatsoever. But it's like going into a crowded bus station or train station during rush hour. They don't have general practitioners. The medical system does need revamped in some way, shape, or form. So, for example, I've talked about in the past prescription refills. In the United States, I can get a prescription of medication, and then the next thing, it's good for like 30 days, and then I have 3 refills, so I can get basically 3 or 4 months of medications. And I don't have to go back to the hospital. I can call it in, I can go online, I can get my prescriptions filled, and everything's good to go. The problem is in Korea, maybe because they're overworked, is because the majority of hospitals in Korea are for-profit hospitals. So if you have more appointments, you're going to make more money. And so imagine in a country of 52, 53 million people, whatever it is, however many people come in for prescriptions or refills, they only fill them for like 90 days or 30 days. So every month, if you have multiple medications, which a lot of seniors do, let's say you got pain management, let's say you got stomach issues, you got GERD, let's say you got some, some ear, eye, nose, and throat, maybe you got some little depression, anxiety things. So those are 4 medications. You need to make 4 appointments to see each of those doctors every month to get your medications. Now, there are some medications that you can get like 60 days, but still, part of the overburden that these people are facing comes from prescription refill medication. So, yeah, it's just absolutely crazy on how, and the people that are paying the price are the Korean people, the everyday working people, and the foreigners like me who live here. So, yeah, they're the ones that are getting canceled appointments. These are the people that are dying of heart attacks and cardiac arrest and strokes and so on and so forth because of the doctor strike. They can't treat people. There's been cases people aren't getting the necessary surgeries they need. It's just bad all the way around. And it's interesting how this popped up around the re-election time. What are the odds? And the current administration under Yoon is very different than the Korean Medical Association political component, which is liberal. It's a mess. So anyway, it ends up that the government can go ahead with their expansion plan, and it says each university will have to reflect the change in its college admission by the end of the month, given that the college admissions process for the 2025 academic year is approaching. They got to revise, do a bunch of stuff, which is, they're going to give them time to do that. But now has basically said the government submitted 49 documents and pieces of evidence, including minutes and transcripts of expert committee meetings under Health and Medical Policy Deliberation Committee, and the source of the information that used to decide on increasing the seats of medical students or doctors eventually by 2000. And what's interesting is that there's not a lot of doctors in rural areas, out in the sticks and the boonies and the smaller cities in Seoul. So the government has also said that, hey, a certain amount of these doctors, I think it was like 80% of them, are going to go to rural areas or areas where it's not Seoul, which I don't think is a bad thing. I think there needs to be some financial compensation for that and whatever, maybe help in repayment of those student loans to become a doctor. That would come into play. It's kind of like what we have in the United States. My daughter's a doctor. She did her she got scholarships for her pre-med, and then she got medical school through the United States military, paid for all that, gave her a living stipend, and then said, hey, we paid for your medical school, you're going to give us 8 years as a doctor. And so she ran with that, and it's awesome. It's an awesome deal. So anyway, the medical community has continuously claimed that the quota hike wasn't determined on scientific grounds, and it would lead to the deterioration of education and collapse of the country's well-regarded medical system. I see no proof. As an outsider, I see zero proof of this. I just don't see it. Now, the Korean Medical Association, largest group of doctors with 140,000 members that serve about 52 million people here in Korea, says they're going to appeal this. And it's just strange on how these doctors in the KMA are making all these claims. Oh, it's going to destroy the medical system, and oh, it's going to be terrible. Oh, cats and dogs living together. It's just, I just don't see it. And the other strange thing is what we don't see by the Korean Medical Association is the fact that they have no workable solutions. Now, I don't care if you're left or right. I'm an independent. It doesn't really matter. I'm for the good ideas, whether they come from the left or the right. And let's do what makes sense. Let's use common sense. But the one thing that I see that is absent from the Korean Medical Association is any workable solutions. So in other words, the Korean government says, hey, we need 2,000 more doctors. So we're going to open up 2,000 additional slots because we haven't had an increase in doctors in the last 27 years. We have an aging population that is going to get worse and worse, and they need more doctors. And then the KMA is complaining about being overworked, 100, 120 hours, seeing 100 patients a day plus. But the KMA never offers any solutions. It's okay to say, oh, we don't need more doctors, but there needs to be something to justify that. Just saying there's no proof, there's no scientific proof, that's not proof. That's just rhetoric. Offer up an actual plan that has some meat to it. That's what we really need. And if you're being so overworked, and what's the alternative to not hiring or expanding 2,000 more doctors in Korea to the 140,000 doctors they already have? You hear crickets. It's nothing but crickets. Same thing with all the other rhetoric. Oh, it'll destroy our medical system. Okay, how would it do that? Nobody asks those questions in the Korean media, which is weird. But yeah, nobody asks those questions. They don't offer any workable solutions. They don't say, well, we can alleviate this overburden by doing this, this, and this. Well, then if you did have a way of actually alleviating the overburden of too much work in 36-hour shifts and 100 and 120-hour work weeks, you're the KMA. Why wouldn't you have already fixed this? I'm not sure. See what I mean? It doesn't make any sense. The next thing we're going to take a look about is the question is, well, how much money do Korean doctors make? And some say doctors oppose medical school quota hike to protect their turf, while others believe they deserve fair compensation for their vital services. And recent government data revealing South Korean doctors, not the resident doctors, they call them junior doctors, rake in an annual of 300 million won, which is about $220,000, nearly 5 times higher than the country's average salary of 42.14 million won. And it's rekindled this debate, and the government's plan to increase 2,000 more doctors fear that the value and pricing of their services could fall, which doesn't really make sense because the majority of doctors work in for-profit hospitals. That should be an issue taken up with their employer, who is a for-profit hospital, not the government. I don't know. It's just kind of a weird thing. And, if you spend that much time doing, you got to get good grades in high school, you got to get good grades in, college pre-med, then in medical school, and then you go and you do your residency for however many, 3, 4, 5 years, or 10 years, 12 years, depending on your specialty. You should get compensated for all of that information that you learn, because that's an obscene amount of information. Even just being a general doctor, the amount of information that you need to digest and regurgitate and learn and know is insane. Doctors are paid for how much they work, especially life-saving care and treatment to patients. On a personal note, I don't know why doctors earning 6 digits ruffles feathers. A self-employed physician who runs an internal medicine clinic in Sangam-dong, Western Seoul. And anyway, it ends up that, about the prices in private clinics. So 300 million at the end of 2022. The figure is up about 44.7% from the corresponding figure of 208 million in 2016. So that's another thing that came out earlier on, is that, we're not getting paid enough. And it's like, well, here it shows that you've been getting an increase in pay. So it just another thing. I just don't understand it. The ministry also said that physicians have noticed a significant increase in their earnings over the years due to the shortage of doctors, which led to a rise in the cost of labor. So in other words, the more appointments that you have, the more money the hospital is going to make, and the more money that the doctor is going to make, because it's, pay-to-play type of system. Salary for doctors providing severe emergency medical services was 201 million, up 4% from 2016. During the same period, doctors working in medical clinics earned 345 million won, an 8.3% increase, and private practices. This is interesting because private practices are not affected by this strike. So it's after you become a doctor, then physicians go out and they, hang their hat on a building or a clinic or whatever, and they work on their own. They get paid even more. So private eye doctors earn 615 million won on average. Self-employed orthopedic doctors made 471 million. 431. Doctors in anesthesiology and pain medicine made 391 million. So yeah, they're making in the private sector, in a private clinic, which they have those around. There's a number of them. You can make a lot of money. You can make more than working in a regular hospital. So but again, these people aren't affected by the doctor strike. And so it's funny that the Korean Medical Association says, hey, if we get too many doctors, that's gonna be too competitive. It's gonna be bad for our doctors. We're gonna lose money. And it's like that logic doesn't follow, because you see doctors that will go out onto the open market and the free market, and they get paid even more. So having more doctors would actually be a good thing, because you have more doctors that could work in medical school, teaching hospitals. There's 100 of them to provide services. And then once they become doctors, they can continue to work in said hospitals, or they can go out onto their own and work in clinics and get paid even more. So saying that the addition of 2,000 more medical students, i.e. doctors, will destroy the medical community, I just don't see that happening, because we don't see that happening now. There's just no basis. There's no facts, and there's no meat to their argument. So anyway, it's just, and the one last thing that it ends up saying here, in addition to the data released by the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development in July last year, showed that Korean physicians earned the most among the 28 member countries that provided the statistics. U.S. didn't provide relevant data for that study. So yeah, Korean doctors and the Korean Medical Association here in Korea is pretty good. But the problem is their doctor to patient ratio is at the lowest. It's at the bottom of the list. I think below them is like Turkey and Mexico. But now with the strike, now we're into third world country doctor-patient ratios, so things are getting really bad. People are getting sick and not being able to get surgeries, and they're dying. And the Korean people are taking the brunt of this. Another interesting note along with this is that Seoul is establishing its first military medical school. So yeah, it's mulling the establishment of a military medical school to secure doctors who will serve in the military for at least 10 years. Kind of similar to what we do in the United States. They're going to pre-screen, and they're going to pay for your medical school, and you're going to go through residency, and after residency, you're going to give 10 years, but you're going to have all your student loan debt paid off. That is huge. That is an awesome deal. Granted, you're not going to get paid as much, but you could work towards a pension in the military and so on and so forth. No policy decisions or implementation plans have been finalized at this time, but they're looking to do this as a thing. And matter of fact, in previous videos, I talked about how the Korean government has actually taken military doctors and put them into the civilian hospitals to help with emergency medicine and so on and so forth. The Defense Ministry plans to commission a research project to determine the structure and scale of the military medical school as early as this year, according to ministry official who wanted to remain anonymous. So yeah, they're moving on with this, and it should be noted for the people that don't know, South Korea requires all able-bodied men to do mandatory military service of 18 months. Instead, junior male doctors will have the option to fulfill their mandatory duties as medical officers for about 38 months. But the country has recorded single digits in the number of applicants for long-term service over the past 10 years. amid wider calls for enhancing working conditions and increased wages. There were no applicants for long-term positions in 2020 and 2023, while the highest number of applicants was 4 in 2014. Only one applicant applied for such position in both 2021 and 2022, which is, this is really weird. Korea is such an odd place. And I don't mean that in any way disrespectful. It's just different than the United States, so that's why I say it's odd. In Korea, the big thing, some of the glaring differences is that a lot of Koreans like brand new things. They like the new phones, the new cars, the new bags, the new this and that, and they update every single year. A lot of Koreans won't, go to secondhand stores. In the United States, secondhand stores are a thing. It is a huge thing in the United States. So you have this mentality of, keeping up with the Joneses, which is more keeping up with the Kims, than it is in the United States with keeping up with the Joneses. It is way worse. And, with K-pop and cosmetic surgery and so on and so forth, it seems to be more of that than there is in the United States. It is really, and so that mentality comes into play. So it doesn't surprise me that when the government says, hey, we'll pay for your medical school and you got to give us 10 years, that not a lot of people want to do that. But that just shows how bad the debt problem is in Korea, because a lot of Koreans are into debt. Debt has grown exponentially here in Korea, and because people run up their credit cards, they buy new cars, they buy apartments and this and that, and they don't save for retirement as much as they should. Of course, nobody does that. Very few. But yeah, it's a system in which here's a good deal and people aren't jumping on it. And I don't think people realize, kind of like the medical school students that quit going to medical school because of this KMA doctor strike thing, I don't think they realize they have to pay back their student loans. Now they have to redo that year of medical school. And if you say, screw it, I'm not going to be a doctor, you still got to do your mandatory military service. So it's probably a good thing that those people who quit and don't go to medical school and don't become doctors leave, because they probably wouldn't make good doctors anyway. You wouldn't want somebody with that type of mentality. You want somebody that wants to help people, that wants to live up to the Hippocratic Oath of take care of the patients first and foremost. And of course, you need to be compensated for that. But this whole medical, debacle that they have here in Korea is still ongoing, and it's strangely quiet. I haven't reported on this for a number of weeks because everything has gone silent. And this was the most recent thing that popped up, and I'm just like, even my wife, she's watching the news, and there's very, very little coverage about the doctor strike, even though it's shutting down hospitals. And in previous videos, I talked about how there's hospitals that are losing up to, $800,000 a day, $700,000 a day in this thing in the for-profit hospitals. So you think the for-profit hospital is losing tons of money that they would put their 2 cents in and say, hey, you this is hurting our bottom line. You need to get the doctors back in here. But it's weird because it's under the KMA, which is a leftist, liberal leaning view, versus the current administration, which is a little bit more conservative, and they just don't like they just don't like each other. It's like cats and dogs fighting. I just don't get it. I really just don't get it. I don't think the medical school students, I don't think the resident doctors are looking down the road and saying, okay, well, if I stick to my guns and I toe the line and I stay on this strike and I end up getting suspended, worst case scenario, I get suspended and I have to redo, is the KMA going to pay for my increased student loans? Absolutely not. Will the KMA pay for their utilities, their rent, their housing, their food, all the things that you need to live? No, they won't. Worst case scenario, you get banned from practicing medicine in Korea. Is the KMA going to have your back? You're still going to be responsible for student loans, and you can't be a doctor. And is the KMA going to have your back? No. So I don't really understand how this is happening. Um, it just boggles the mind. Another thing we're going to take a look at is the debate of no senior zones. This is really interesting because here in Korea, we have noticed, and we've been here over a year, retired, and we've noticed signs on establishments that will say no kids because they have coffee shops or restaurants or whatever, and no little kids. Usually, what we see it is in coffee shops, and that they don't want kids running around because adults want to have adult time, and then they'll have their little cakes and their lattes and so on and so forth. And they'll talk. They'll get away from the kids. Nobody wants screaming kids, which I will say, Korean kids are more well behaved than kids in America. Toddlers, babies, the whole 9 yards. There is a marked difference, and Korean children are way better behaved and quieter than kids in the United States. Yeah, it's a thing. But now we've even seen signs, especially like where we live close to Camp Humphreys, where there's stores that are catered to foreigners and soldiers and service members of the U.S. military, where the signs say no Koreans allowed in the store, which is like, that doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, you're a Korean who owns a Korean store that is selling stuff to foreigners, but you don't want Koreans to come in and buy stuff? That makes no sense to me whatsoever. But, hey, we're going to go into one store, and my wife pointed out the sign, and it's like, yeah, they don't want Koreans in there. And she goes, I can't go in there. Well, my wife became a U.S. citizen, so she can go in there. I always thought that would be really interesting if they gave her, we go in there and they gave her a hard time, and she could just say, I'm a U.S. citizen. Get away from me. But yeah, places like that in the United States, there would be lawsuits out the yin-yang because you're discriminating by race. But here in Korea, having no kid zone coffee shops, it's not frowned at all. It's like, yeah, you need to have some adult time without kids. Totally understand, and I get it. That makes sense. But now there's a debate on no senior zones, and this has gone on before, and we'll take a look at this, is that public pool in Jaecheon Sports Training Center in North Chuncheon Province. Chuncheon used to be, it's still there. There used to be a military base called Camp Page, and I was up there at one time. Oh, that was turned over back to the Koreans. The base is gone. We've traveled up there, and it's cordoned off, and there's a bunch of problems. But yeah, it's no longer there. So you have this indoor space, this big pool, and the online forums are debating on whether this pool should be open to seniors. One commenter posted, people over 65 use the pool in very dirty ways, such as urinating in the water, and complain a lot, which ruins the atmosphere. Their use should be restricted. The pool in question, reportedly state-of-the-art pool with 8 50-meter lanes, opened on 3 May. Then another one said, the older men who don't shower before entering the pool and just get into the lane, some even urinate in the shower. Furthermore, they don't yield to fast swimmers in the lane. Other commenters opposed the notion that older people might be banned from using the facility, fearing it would encourage more age-based exclusion or discrimination. Such no senior zones are akin to no kid zones, which have recently surfaced in Korea by restaurants and cafes claiming that children accompanying their parents disrupt quiet or sophisticated atmospheres exclusively for adults. And we've been to a number of those places. There are places like that, and I don't know, most of the Koreans that we know in the Weiss family, they don't think there's anything wrong with that. The controversy over no senior zones in the country began in May when a photo posted showing a cafe door with the words, no seniors, no entry for elderly over 60. Next to it was a sticker saying, guide dogs welcome. So if you're blind, you can join. But if you're over 60, I'm 58. I'm going to be 58 this year. So I'm getting close to. And I don't know. An employee at Billy Angel Franchise Cafe told an older customer, "You have stayed here too long." The employee gave the customer a message telling him to leave, saying, "Due to you, young customers don't come in here at all." The franchise later published an official apology. So, and there comes a time of where it's like, yeah, you can have a coffee, you sit and talk for an hour, you eat your little cake, an hour, 2 hours. But longer than that, it's pretty much, coffee shops are a thing in Korea. Bakeries, all that type of thing. You get your little snacks, your little pastries, your little, brunch, lunch type of thing in your lattes. And you sit and talk for a couple hours, and then that's kind of a normal thing. 2.5 hours, and then you leave. So obviously, if you're staying longer than that for them to say, hey, you need to skedaddle, you're talking a lot longer than that. So, and if you don't buy anything, yeah, what do you do? Such incidents have emerged amid growing concern over public manifestations of intolerance and discrimination in Korean society, according to observers. The continuous emergence of know someone zones in Korean society means that exclusion among groups is increasing while efforts to understand each other are disappearing. Professor from Chung-An University. Experts said the emergence of no senior zones reflects younger generation's negative perceptions of older people. I'm older. I want to get a sticker on my car that says old, grumpy, and retired, because they do that. They have written in Korean, they'll have like baby on board, new driver, old driver, senior driver, whatever. I think I'd like to do that. And then when I get out of the car, all buffed and jacked, it'd be like, whoa. But yeah, nevertheless, they stress that banning customers based on their age is explicit discrimination, that Korean society needs to move from its current age-differentiated society to being age-integrated society. It's appropriate to generalize about all older people. Claims that older people are dirty, should be excluded from pools shows prejudice and lack of understanding. In general, ageism should be recognized as a serious form of discrimination in the same context as racism, sexism, or ableism, that's something interesting as well. In the United States, there's a lot of people who are handicapped. There's a lot of people that are in wheelchairs and have different infirmities or, genetic or accidents or injuries or whatever it is, or you got a missing chromosome or whatever. You see a lot of that in the United States and other countries, but in Korea, yeah, you don't see much of that. Now, granted, the United States, you have about 15, 20 million people or so, and a number of illegal immigrants. Got to bump up those numbers. But you'll see a lot of people that are handicapped. Here in Korea, you only has 52 million people. You don't see a lot of handicapped people around. It is very, very rare. And we have traveled to Seoul. We've taken trips and so on and so forth. It is rare to see somebody who has a handicap. And we have seen racism. I can remember back to my first time in Korea back in 1988 when I came to Korea in the military, just before the '88 Olympics. There were clubs that said no foreigners allowed. And so if you went past the Ville, which is the military clubs that was geared towards military service members and so on and so forth, yeah, you're welcome in. But if you went past that and went into, the normal places, there were clubs and restaurants that they would not allow foreigners in, whether you're white, black, Hispanic, or whatever. Just no foreigners. We're not doing that. And there's even talks of that still happening today in Korea, but not as much as it was before. Sexism, yeah, there's definitely a hierarchy into that, which is, some of it can be construed as being just kind of, I guess, what you could call more traditional values. You have roles for men and roles for women and so on and so forth. But then hiring practices and sexual assaults and things like that, it's a thing, and things are getting better here in Korea. But back to the ageism thing, in other countries, ageism is treated very seriously with legal consequences for the parties involved. As Korea is projected to be super aged by the year 2025, each generation should try to understand the others. a super age society who needs a lot of doctors. So, the number of people aged 65 or older is expected to reach 10 million, or 20.3% of the total population, putting the country on the threshold of a super age society, similar to what we see in Japan. There are few to no administrative or legal basis to sanction age discrimination under the current law. Did you know that? Yeah. We need to establish legal basis upon which to punish blatant discrimination against a certain group of people. Now, we have actually seen some places where they won't allow seniors in because they fall down and break a hip or whatever, and it's just, and that's the reasoning is, oh, well, we have unstable stairs and steps and whatever, and so, no seniors are allowed in here, which just seems weird. It's and Lord forbid you're disabled. There are tons of places that there's no way you could get a wheelchair in. There's no, what is it, like we have for disabilities, and the name escapes me. I can't remember it. But whatever it is, the rules and the regulations saying that businesses must have certain basic accommodations for handicapped people to allow service and so on and so forth. Here in Korea, there's a lot of stores, coffee shops, restaurants that, there's no way that you would be able to get somebody in a walker or a wheelchair into that business or establishment. It's just not a thing, and it's just kind of weird. Article 11 of the country's constitution states there shall be no discrimination in political, economic, social, or cultural life on account of sex, religion, or social status. The Human Rights Commission of Korea cited this clause in 2017 in its ruling that no kid zones constitute acts of discrimination are illegal. Still, it lacks the legal authority to enforce its ruling on businesses, and thus its ruling only remains a recommendation. Which is kind of weird because there's no, it doesn't mention anything about age, or it doesn't mention anything, it does have sex, religion, or social status, but it doesn't have anything about race. So, it's it's kind of an interesting thing on what we see when we're talking about these things. And other countries have similar situations, and other countries treat their age population with high regard, so there's a huge scale on which we see. In the United States, we just put them in a home and forget about them. Here in Korea, on the other side of the coin, a lot of seniors will be taken care of by their family members, and which is a good thing. But now that the current generation, the younger generations, are not getting married and they're not having kids. The government's trying to spur on the younger generation to have kids because no kids, you're eventually, they're not going to be Korean people. Japan is facing the same thing. So, it's just a very interesting time to be alive and see what's going on. But what do you do with that? And how do you approach that? And my thinking is, as an American, is that you shouldn't discriminate on sex, race, age, handicap, ableism, or whatever it is. It's just wrong to do. But if you do that, the free market will help correct it. So in other words, people are going to lose money if they say no kids, but obviously they're doing okay, like coffee shops and cafes and so on and so forth, that, it's not considered that big of a deal. But when you get into a place where now you have a public pool or a public facility run by the government or the powers that be, now you're saying no seniors can go in. That's very problematic because now you're saying that a public facility that should be open to all the public, now you just don't want seniors because, they're old and they're dirty. Well, how does that go with handicapped people? I know there's a lot of people that have the misconception that if you're handicapped, that you're dirty and you don't, see, it's a slippery slope. And then it's like, well, how many people are we going to dismiss and say that you can't, participate or even go into these facilities that is open to the public? That's discrimination, in my opinion. So, it's kind of a weird thing that's going on. here in Korea in regards to that, and it's different. It's definitely different. Um, but in the United States, we kind of have that too. There'll be some places where you will go and you will walk in and you will know that you are not welcome there. They don't blatantly post it and say, whites don't come in here or blacks don't come in here or whatever it is, but it's there. I mean, we were traveling through Texas one time and we're trying to get to Clarksville, Tennessee, where I was being stationed. And we were passing through Texas, me and the wife, and my wife's Korean, by the way. And we had our kid, our daughter, and she's awesome, quiet, great kid. And we stop at this place, and there was a diner. And when we walked in there, everything stopped. It was like, and it was such a bad vibe because obviously my wife is not of American descent. And yeah, the temperature dropped about 50 degrees. And it's like, yeah, it's hungry. And then we walked in there, and it's like, yeah, we're not going to eat here. Boom. And so the market is going to decide, and racism will die out with those people. We also experienced racism in the town that we lived in Canyon City, Colorado, which, by the way, was the KKK headquarters for Colorado. I didn't know that when we moved there, and nobody told me until after I moved there. And so a lot of that it's dying out, but it takes a while. So yeah, it's just, I've had seniors, as me and my wife are walking into grocery stores there in Canyon City, Colorado, to where the seniors would look and I'd say some snarky remark, and it's like, really, Grandpa? That's what, telling her to go back to her own country. Oh, by the way, she's an American citizen, but Gramps, if you want to have that attitude, we can talk about this in the parking lot. My wife hates it when I get mad. But, that's what it came down to. And we would experience racism, and my wife would experience the racism, and of course I get to see it because I'm married to her. But yeah, I'll throw down with you if you want to be stupid. But in the end, as much zeal as I have for this, and for my wife, obviously, I mean, I would go to prison for. You just need to realize that sometimes racism just needs to go away by people dying. And we took comfort in that all of the racism that we experienced in Canyon City, Colorado, and in Florence and some weird parts of Colorado, it ends up that we were happy because we knew that there was a limited amount of time in which these people would be racist, because their racism would die with them, and that would help the overall situation. So, which I always thought was kind of funny, because the people who are racist against other races were races that came to the United States, was a race that didn't belong in the United States. Yeah, I know, right? It's always the old white people. I don't understand. You need to go back to your own country. It's like, listen, Gramps, you're not a Native American Indian. You came over here. You're an immigrant, and you're a race that wasn't here. And so just stop with that bullshit. Yeah. But with that being said, have I ever experienced racism here in Korea? I've tried to go into clubs. Me and some friends of mine who had Korean friends tried to go into clubs, and the club says, nope, no foreign. Koreans can go in, foreigners, you can't go in. Did that piss me off? No, because it's like, I have a lot of money, I got paid, we're going to go somewhere else. The market will correct itself. And, the Koreans friends that we had, they were a little mad. But as far as anything other than that, other than, a few stores here and there that like, oh, no foreigners or whatever. And then it's like, no foreigners? Okay, then you don't want my money, you're not going to get my money. Eventually, there's going to come a time where all of this is going to come to a head, and it's going to have some major implications, and to the point of where it's like, they're going to see that you shouldn't discriminate, because that is a profit stream that you're telling to go away. And in a free market society, it doesn't make sense to throw money away. And like the thing with the public pool, this is kind of crazy, because then it's like, ooh, old people don't shower and they pee in the pool. Have you ever seen kids? Yeah, peeing in the pool is like a thing for kids. You'll see the little kid playing with the ball, and then all of a sudden they'll stop, and they're like, they get the pee shivers because they just peed in the pool. It's not. It's not only relegated to just seniors. And as far as people, seniors don't shower before they go in the pool. I I've been to Jim Jibongs where, the saunas and stuff like that, and you're supposed to shower before you get into, the hot tubs and stuff like that. I've seen a number of Korean men who don't shower before they go in, and these are younger people. So, yeah, that logic doesn't really fly. It's, if you want to fix the problem, then just have an inspection before somebody gets in the pool. You got to be drenched with water before you can get in the pool. It's an easy fix. But the majority of people will do what's right. And, I don't know, maybe that's what we need to focus on. And the younger generation, I think the younger generation is at a place now where they don't think they will get old. And so if this type of discrimination continues and it builds and it grows, and then when they get old, guess what? Those people that were discriminating against the old people, now they're going to be old and they're going to be like, oh shit, I can't go in to a lot of these places. And I advocated this, and now I can't go anywhere because I'm old and nobody wants me to go into anywhere and do anything. See, there's that long-term thinking that I don't think people understand. So, yeah, just kind of the intricacies of living in a foreign country and retiring in a foreign country. Different strokes for different folks. I mean, here in Korea, it ends up that they would actually, if you were homosexual here in Korea, they would have homosexual clubs and bars, and the government would come in and raid them, and people would go to prison. And this was in the late 80s and 90s. They put you in prison. So even then, I mean, that's not my cup of tea, but that happened here in Korea. And as far as that's getting better, obviously, as with every country, but, just don't flaunt it into everybody's faces. That's the thing that, whatever you do behind closed doors, just keep it to yourself. I don't go out on the rooftops and pronounce my heterosexuality. Oh, yes, heterosexuality, we make babies, it's great. My identity does not revolve around my sexuality and telling people, it's just not a thing. Whatever you do behind closed doors, that's between you and your partner and whoever. I don't really care. But when you start preaching it from the rooftops, that is problematic because now we're seeing discrimination in the United States of that LGBTQ, whatever, they're trying to enforce that type of mentality and basically indoctrinate children in the United States. So let's not teach math, science, history, social sciences, and things like that. Math and reading scores are going down, but our children know the 72 different genders. That's not what school is for. School is not to indoctrinate children, but to learn and how to process information and to think critically, which has gone out the window a long time ago. So, yeah. Don't get me started down that road. Anyway, so that's what we got going on. We're going to finish this up. I now have to drink my breakfast and then go on a workout and do that. But this is what we got going on here in Korea. The doctor's strike, you got a little bit of racism, a little bit of ageism going on. There's always some kind of drama, no matter what country you're in. But here in Korea, it's been good to us. We've been here over a year. Haven't seen, we've never felt unsafe here in Korea. Expenses are less. Majority of Korean people as a whole are wonderful, caring people, and we really appreciate that. So we just wish some of the knuckleheads, like the doctor's strike, would get a clue and, actually, you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, that's what we got going on. So, yeah, if you got any questions, you can check that out. Put some comments in the comment section down below, but that's what we got going on here in Korea. And, yeah, that's it. So we'll see you on the next one. Peace.